June 1941, from his office in Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler surveyed a map of Europe that now largely belonged to Nazi Germany. Paris had fallen, London was under siege. From Norway to Greece, France to Poland, Nazi flags flew over conquered capitals, all under Nazi control. In just 2 years, he had conquered more territory than Napoleon. But for Hitler, Europe was just the beginning. His real vision was far more ambitious, a global German empire stretching from the Americas to Asia. Cities rebuilt in Aryan style, entire populations enslaved or eliminated, and a master race ruling over what remained of humanity. This wasn't just the dream of a madman. It was a methodically planned campaign of conquest that nearly succeeded. This is the story of how Hitler built the most powerful war machine in history, and how terrifyingly close he came to using it to conquer the world. The road to Hitler's plan for world conquest began not with tanks or treaties, but with an idea that would reshape the 20th century. The concept of German racial supremacy, specifically the superiority of what he called the Aryan race. This wasn't entirely new. European theories of racial hierarchy had existed for decades. But Hitler transformed these ideas into something unprecedented, a complete worldview where Germans were a master race, destined to rule, and all others existed merely to serve or be eliminated. Central to this ideology was Lebensraum, also known as living space. Hitler argued that Germany needed to conquer vast territories, particularly in Eastern Europe, to ensure the master race's survival. The Slavic people occupying these lands were, in Nazi ideology, Untermenschen, subhumans to be cleared away. The Nazi state systematically implemented these beliefs. Education was redesigned around racial theory. Scientific institutions were corrupted to support Nazi racial claims. Laws were passed preventing marriage between Aryans and non-Aryans. With conquest on the horizon, a vast system of over 400 genetic health courts had been established across Germany, involving thousands of doctors in the process of determining racial purity. The Nazi state's breeding program, Lebensraum, would eventually establish facilities in multiple occupied countries to create what they considered the perfect Aryan children. This transformation of racist ideology into state policy created the foundation for Hitler's global ambitions. By convincing Germans they were biologically superior, he gave them what he saw as a scientific justification for world conquest. And to achieve this racial destiny, Hitler would need to transform Germany into something unprecedented, a nation built entirely for war. In 1933, Germany's military was a shadow of its former self. The Treaty of Versailles had limited it to just 100,000 men. No tanks, no air force, no submarines. On paper, Germany was practically defenseless, but behind closed doors, something unprecedented was taking place. In secret factories across the country, German engineers were designing weapons that would revolutionize warfare. While Hitler assured the world of his peaceful intentions, the Third Reich was preparing for conquest on an industrial scale. The four-year plan of 1936 transformed Germany into a war economy. Factories that officially produced tractors were secretly manufacturing tanks. Civilian pilot training schools were actually creating the Luftwaffe. German merchant ships were being built with hidden gun mounts. By 1939, Germany had achieved military superiority through a combination of industrial efficiency, technological innovation, and strategic deception. The stage was set for Hitler's campaign of conquest. The German industry had been transformed. The Krupp works alone employed 150,000 workers. The Messerschmitt factories could produce a new fighter plane every 2 hours. Underground facilities stretched for miles, manufacturing everything from ammunition to experimental weapons. It was the most rapid military buildup in history. Hitler hadn't just rebuilt Germany military, he had created the most sophisticated fighting force in history. And none of Germany's future victims saw it coming until it was too late. But military might alone wouldn't be enough. To To achieve his global ambitions, Hitler would need to master an even more powerful weapon. August 23, 1939, in Moscow, champagne glasses clinked as Hitler's foreign minister and Stalin toasted their new alliance. The world was stunned. Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, sworn enemies, had become friends overnight. But Stalin didn't realize he was dining with the architect of his own destruction. The Nazi-Soviet pact was Hitler's masterpiece of deception, a false friendship that would give Germany exactly what it needed: time and security. This wasn't the first time Hitler had fooled the world. For years, he played a brilliant double game. To the West, he portrayed himself as a reasonable statesman, wanting only to right the wrongs of Versailles. Germany wants peace, he declared, even as his factories churned out weapons of war. Each diplomatic success followed a careful pattern: divide opponents, make limited demands, offer temporary guarantees, then break them when advantageous. By 1939, Hitler had conquered more territory through deception than warfare. The German army hadn't fired a shot, but Europe's map had been redrawn. And his greatest deception, the pact with Stalin, would give him the freedom to launch his master plan. But Hitler's greatest gamble lay ahead: a massive betrayal that would trigger the largest military operation in history. Dawn, June 22, 1941. Along a front stretching 1,800 miles, longer than the distance from Los Angeles to New York, over 3 million German soldiers waited for a single command. Operation Barbarossa was about to begin. Operation Barbarossa represented the culmination of Hitler's strategic vision, the conquest of Soviet living space. That would make Germany a true world power. But this massive invasion would prove to be both the Third Reich's greatest gamble and its ultimate undoing. The numbers were staggering: 3.2 million German troops, supported by 3,600 tanks and 2,700 aircraft, launched a three-pronged assault. Army Group North aimed for Leningrad, Army Group Center for Moscow, and Army Group South for Ukraine's resources. Initially, everything went according to plan. The Wehrmacht advanced 50 miles per day. Entire Soviet armies were encircled and destroyed. By September, German tanks could see the spires of Moscow through their periscopes. But Hitler had made a fatal miscalculation. The Soviet Union wasn't France. Its armies could retreat for thousands of miles, trading space for time. And winter was coming, a winter that would turn the German advance into a frozen nightmare. While Barbarossa faltered in the east, Hitler's ambition stretched even further, to a truly global plan for domination that would reshape the entire world. Hitler's plans for world domination were systematically developed through a series of strategic directives and research programs. The new order envisioned a world divided into 4 major Reich zones, each serving different functions in a Nazi-dominated global economy. By 1942, Nazi Germany controlled territory from the Atlantic to the gates of Moscow, but according to captured Nazi documents, Hitler saw this as just the first step toward global dominance. The evidence appears in multiple sources. Hitler's own writings spoke of Germany's need to become a world power. Military records show the development of weapons designed specifically for intercontinental warfare, including the Me-264 long-range bomber meant to strike American cities, and the Type XXI U-boats that could remain submerged for unprecedented periods. The Nazi leadership divided the world into spheres of conquest. First was Fortress Europe, already largely under their control. Next came European Russia, vital for its resources and agricultural land. The Mediterranean and Middle East would provide oil crucial for mechanized warfare. Africa would supply raw materials and strategic positions. This wasn't just planning. German scientists worked on weapons to make it possible. The V-2 rocket program proved that long-range strikes were feasible. The jet engine program aimed to give Germany air superiority across continents. Submarine warfare was meant to strangle enemy commerce globally. Wehrmacht records show preparation for warfare in every climate, from Arctic conditions to desert combat. The Africa Corps gained experience fighting in North Africa. Mountain divisions trained for operations in the Caucasus. Each conquest would provide stepping stones to the next. But as Hitler reached for global dominance, the very scale of his ambitions would lead to decisions that would prove fatal. The Battle of Berlin. For years, Hitler seemed unstoppable. His armies had conquered Europe. His tanks had rolled across Russia. But by late 1943, his empire began crumbling from all sides. In the east, the Red Army had reversed the tide after Stalingrad, launching an offensive that would drive the Wehrmacht back to German soil. In the south, the Allies had taken Sicily, and Italy had switched sides. Then came the biggest invasion in history. On June 6, 1944, as the sun rose over the French coast, Hitler's worst nightmare came true. The Allies were coming. 156,000 American, British, and Canadian troops hit the beaches of Normandy. Within months, Paris was free, and Allied tanks were racing toward Germany. By 1945, Germany was fighting a hopeless war. His mighty war machine was running out of fuel, soldiers, and time. Allied bombers struck day and night. Soviet forces crossed the Oder River, while American troops reached the Rhine. In April, the Red Army encircled Berlin. The end came in Berlin. Hitler, the man who wanted to rule the world, was now hiding in a concrete bunker beneath his burning capital. As Soviet artillery pounded the city above, he still ordered armies to fight, armies that no longer existed. In his final days, he married Eva Braun, wrote his will, and took his own life. 7 days later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Reich that was meant to rule the world had been reduced to ruins. Hitler's body was burned in a shell crater, and his dream of world domination went up in smoke with it. Today, the Third Reich's ruins stand as monuments not to Hitler's power, but to his failure. His quest for world domination achieved the opposite of what he intended. It united much of humanity in a common cause and proved that even the mightiest tyranny can be defeated when the world stands together against it.